Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Was a micro issue highlighted by a report in The Times, a small and yet very significant issue. In Middlesbrough, front doors of many homes allocated to asylum seekers were painted red in what turned out to be an invitation to stigma and worse. The homes belonged to a subcontractor of G4S called Jomast. Red, it seems, was just the colour they chose for their property. But should they have known it was causing problems? And a far bigger question emerges: how do we choose where asylum seekers live anyway? John Sweeney has spent the day in Middlesbrough and sent this report. It does contain some bad language, and it's not from John Sweeney.
If it's a red door, it's a refugee. Welcome to the Union Street area of Middlesbrough, where you can pick up a house for £45,000. And guess what? Lots of refugees end up living here. Locals say they know where they live because their houses have got red doors. Civilised societies have a duty to look after refugees. In Britain, the government franchised that out to G4S, who subcontracted it in the northeast to a property company, Jomast, who have a signature look. But is there an issue for you because you've got a red door?
Yeah.
Would you like to have a black door, for example?
Yeah, people can't. Basically, it's red door. People can't find out who we are very easily.
They can?
They can't find out who we are. Like, we are refugee,
Yes.
we are from not here.
Not everyone here is colour blind.
I just come out, I saw two younger guys, twin age, like 13 till 50. I spoke to them, you ladies, why are you throwing the egg from my window? They said, fucking black, out of our country, live now, the country. I said, okay, I'm so proud of who I am. Can you just move? They said, no, we're not gonna move until you leave this country.
As you can see, similar evidence down here.
This man lives behind a red door too. Fires have been set, he says, outside his house and the homes of other refugees.
Having been in Sudan, having been physically tortured, sir, when I compare to the two issues, I actually prefer the physical torture. Why? This is such a big statement, I understand that. But with the physical torture, at some point, those people who tortured me will stop beating me. But when I'm here in this house, the mental torture never stops. It is a continuous, daily basis mental torture.
The problem is the consequences of immigration and asylum policy are not visited fairly on rich and poor alike. And there's a simple reason for that: the cost of house prices. Middlesbrough, the country's poorest town, has more asylum seekers than anywhere else in Britain, 1 in 173 residents. 4 out of 10 councils don't house a single asylum seeker, and that includes David Cameron's constituency of Witney. No refugees in sight in North Yorkshire, but this is the home of Stuart Monk, the owner of Jomast, and said to be worth £175 million. Let's go talk to the man behind the black door. Hello, it's John Sweeney here from BBC Newsnight. I'd like to talk to Mr. Monk about the red doors for the asylum seekers. But later, he did talk to the BBC.
I think it's been blown out of proportion. I think it's I don't think it was an issue. It wasn't an issue before today. And as I say, the facts are that there was no reporting of this issue by any asylum seekers, and that goes for both ourselves and for G4S.
But that's not how others remember it.
Do you think it is likely to make that accommodation more safe, painting the doors a different colour, in this case red, so that the whole neighbourhood knows who the asylum seekers are? Do you think that's a good idea?
The fact that our supplier, Jomast, who supplied services to asylum seekers in the previous contract as well as with G4S. I can't comment on the doors being painted red, but I will take that point away.
And Newsnight understands this issue was flagged up 4 years ago.
We had a meeting where the whole thing was discussed and gone into.
When was that meeting?
And that was in September 2012. So it's been going on for quite some time. There's no excuse for anybody to say they didn't know about it.
Do you think that there has been adequate supervision by the government of this issue?
I think there needs to be a lot more supervision of this contract. A lot more. People have come here because they're seeking sanctuary.
Clearly, the refugees have effectively been colour-coded, and for too long, people in the know haven't been listening.
John Sweeney there. Well, in a statement, G4S said, while we have not received any direct complaints from asylum seekers, we acknowledge that the issue of front door colours was first raised with us in 2012. While there was never any policy to discriminate against asylum seekers with the information now available to us, we can see that our earlier decision was ill-judged, and we've committed to repaint the doors within a matter of weeks. Right, well, I'm joined now by Margaret Hodge, former chair of the Public Accounts Committee of the House of Commons, and who was something of an enemy of G4S on more than one occasion, was chairing the meeting you heard from there. Also joined by Stephen Wolfe, who's from UKIP and joins us from Strasbourg, where he's an MEP. Margaret Hodge, what is actually very interesting is that you did spot the issue of red doors, but you didn't follow it up and you didn't really make anything of it. It's only the Times bringing it up today that has brought it to everybody's attention.
Well, let me say two things. First of all, I'm really angry with G4S because through their stupidity, they've allowed this programme tonight to interview UKIP, who no doubt will bang on about how we've got too many asylum seekers, too many immigrants, too many refugees, and they've allowed it to be exploited in the wrong way, and that makes me angry. The second thing to say is when we did that hearing, it was raised. G4S said they'd go away and look for it. The permanent secretary from the Home Office actually said that he would go away and do a very, very thorough check on the quality of the accommodation. But we were also raising other issues because the quality of the accommodation that was being offered by G4S was frankly shocking. 7 or 9 families living on one floor with only 2 toilets, a hostel in another area in a red light district where women were felt they were being looked at.
So it wasn't good. In a general picture, not good. But just on the detail, you didn't follow up on red doors. You didn't go back to G4S and say you said you'd come back on red doors or anything.
Well, we assume every now and then, Evan, we assume that when people say they're going to go away and do something, they do it, and we assume when the permanent secretary of the Home Office says he is concerned about the quality of the accommodation that he will make regular checks. One of the things that astounds me is that in the statement today, what the Home Office have said is that they check 1/3 of the accommodation every month. If they were doing that, somebody should have twigged that this was an incendiary way of stigmatising asylum seekers.
Let me bring Stephen Wolfe in. Stephen Wolfe, Margaret Hodge says you're going to make political capital out of it. Let's not talk about the red doors if we could. Can we just talk about the policy of how we allocate and distribute asylum seekers around the country? Do you think the system is working? And if you don't, what's wrong with it?
Well, you're quite right, Evan. I think the colour of the red doors is simply a red herring. The real issue is the collapse of our asylum policy system and the way that not only do we allocate it across the country, but also the tone and the level of the debate has just been shown by Margaret. Unfortunately, she seems to go along in the same lines of her once leader, Gordon Brown, that would call people bigots for raising the issues of immigration, or indeed her Shadow Secretary of Defence, who makes complaints about people who have British flags during campaigns.
Can I just get on? I just want to get onto the issue.
I am doing, Evan. I am doing, Evan. What I'm saying here is the collapse of the asylum system is due to the weight of the numbers that are coming in, the anticipation of the numbers that will come in, and those who are trying to game the system. And the more important part I find about this is there is a north-south divide. There is a class divide between those who have gone to university and those who've not. There is a wealth divide between those who advocate more asylum seekers who tend to be in London, in the areas like Margaret, which is Islington, who are very wealthy, and the poorest people in this country are having to take the largest burden of this, and I find that part unacceptable.
Okay, Margaret Hodge, that is an interesting point, isn't it? Because obviously, to save money on housing asylum seekers, they're being put in communities who have less voice, less power, and who maybe already have problems of their own, and they don't need any social dislocation as they would see it.
Asylum accommodation used to be provided by local authorities. The coalition government, when they came in, chose this as one of the areas where they wanted to have savings, and they thought that economies of scale, having some big contracts, would save them money. And I think it was one of those areas where actually it didn't bring value, although and I'm not sure it even saved the cash. And let me just say why. I represent Barking. This is an area which has been transformed by immigration and migration, and we have had a lot of people coming in. I think a concentration of asylum seekers in one area, and I agree,
right,
they tend to go in the...
Are you saying they should not... The numbers that have been put in some areas should not be put in those areas?
I agree that there is there is an over-concentration in Middlesbrough.
Right.
Now, I also agree that they tend to go to the poorer areas.
So Whitney needs some if Middlesbrough's going to have as many as it
can
has.
I just put the other side of this argument, Evan? Because
we know the other side, which is just very expensive.
No, it's not just that. That actually, when a group of people arrive as refugees from a particular community, they go to an area. As their friends and relatives arrive, they will also want to be close to the people they know.
Yeah.
So they build a network, and it's a very complex issue. But what you have to do is provide the public service infrastructure so that the community can accept and they can integrate.
Stephen Wolfe, what is the UKIP solution? I know you would have fewer people here, you would have fewer asylum seekers here. In the interim, do you have a solution as to how you house people who are already here?
Yes, the solution has to look at general immigration that comes into this country, because that has an impact on housing and schools.
Yeah.
And then with that you then have our obligations, international obligations, to deal with asylum. And when you're looking at housing, I mean, the housing situation you have to consider is where are most of these people going to find work that works for them, and a lot of that now is down towards the south of London, and London. And what you have to consider there is where you find the areas that these people can go into. I'm going to give you an example.
No,
a taxi driver.
We've got very little time,
a bit
Stephen.
off the cuff. He was saying, why isn't it that we're not building in the very wealthy areas of Hampstead and Islington and Highgate? Why don't we build the tower blocks in there and let those people? There's plenty of land there and there's plenty of capability of building, but we don't. The decisions are always pushed to the north of England, into the poorest areas, in the places of the northwest where I'm a constituency MEP, and I find that utterly unfair.
I'm afraid we are out of time. You've left us with a very provocative solution there. Thank you both very much indeed.